Tate's screen when it's going to be streaming from his computer.
Got it.
Yeah, Tate is here as well.
I hit the starting streaming button by accident, so.
Oh, are we live now? Okay.
I just hit it like when you leaned over to me. My mouse was resting.
That's fine.
I didn't say
hello, everybody.
Incriminating, so.
I think, yeah, we're ready to go. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to our event on the legalities of the COVID-19 measures in Canada and the extension for a long time of emergency measures. Today, we are joined by Vlad Sobolev, and he will be talking to us a bit more about this because he has a lot of experience in this area. Thanks, Vlad. So yeah, just introduce yourself a bit, and we'll take it from here.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your invitation, and I think it's very important for us to have this dialogues and conversation more than anything, just because the world is really changing and things are happening. So we got to make sure that we're able to talk with people and express what's really going on. I don't see I just see like the double screen, so I'm not sure exactly what people are saying, but maybe we can address it so people can see me.
I think you're okay. I see you on my computer. I see you on Tate's computer. So
okay, sounds good. So then it's just for me, it's going to be small. But anyway, so my name is Vlad Sobolev, and I immigrated to Canada when I was 19 as an international student, and I came to study at York University. I came into the program that was a blend of political science, social science, economics, and even some labor law and all the good stuff. So I came to this country for two primary things. I came for freedom and opportunity. I've started business. I had my own business even as a child. I can share a little bit about that too. And Canada was definitely a great place when I came here in '99. So that's 22 plus years ago. And what we've seen happening right now in the last 20 plus months, especially, is very unfortunate and very real. And I was one of the first people to be outspoken early March 2020 on my social media, Instagram, Facebook primarily, and just raising concerns about the government measures that did not really make sense to me. The main thing that I want people to know, if you don't know me, the primary thing that I've done with my life professionally is being a health coach, certified personal trainer. I worked in a Good Life gym for a couple of years. I worked as in some private gyms. I even had my own wellness studio on Eglinton West here in Toronto, where I'm here right now in Toronto. And I had that studio for I think about over 4 years. So I was always engaged with people in terms of helping them to take personal responsibility for their health and well-being, and do not rely on the medical establishment, do not rely on government help, so to speak, and just be self-reliant, resilient, and independent, and take charge of your life more than anything. And the other thing that I've been helping people is to connect to the community of like-minded individuals. So when current measures came around, I realized very quickly, pretty much everything that I've been doing as a health coach and life coach prior to 2020 actually perfectly prepared me to be part of the freedom movement and apply all the skill sets, all the mindset and everything that I've been developing for 20 plus years living in Canada, a lot of personal development, a lot of courses, a lot of education. I basically put that all into being a human activist, as I call it. So the original movement that I started in Toronto, Queen's Park, is Hugs Over Masks. The genesis for that movement was, when I came to the very first protest, May 2nd of 2020, to end the lockdowns in Toronto and Canada as a whole. I came, first of all, as a concerned parent. My son just turned 4 years old at that time. And then I also came as a health and life coach, understanding that all the measures and all the so-called advice given by the government and the so-called experts actually made no sense. And in fact, I already saw early on that all the measures which will actually contribute to detriment health of Canadians and actually will cost health and potential lives through the deaths of despair and collateral damage, collateral deaths that actually would happen because of the measures of the government, not because of severe situation, but because of the measures of the government imposed on the people. And for me, it was very obvious and clear early March, April of 2020, because I actually did listen to the briefings at the federal, provincial, and municipal level for 2.5 months straight, just to make sure that I know what's going on and I'm able to make an educated and knowledgeable decision about what's really going on. And the third kind of person as showing up to the process on May 2nd is I came as a proud Canadian. Again, to that point, I already lived in Canada for over 20 years. I consider this to be my country. I consider this to be a great country. I'm blessed to be here. And more than anything, I consider this country for my kids, and I have 2 now already, and ultimately all Canadian kids. This is the country that we are blessed to be here, and we've got to ensure that the freedoms and prosperity that was Canada known for prior to 2020 does not diminish completely out of our lives. So again, hugs of a mask as a genesis was hugs is something kids do intuitively without even thinking about it. And masks obviously is a symbol of tyranny and fear, and obviously we're opposing masks in general. And over was very important for me. Over is something that I didn't want to just negate a current situation. I wanted to create something powerful, positive, that actually going to overtake the tyranny and the measures that the government was imposing early on. And everything that we've been telling people from day one, every single thing, including mandatory jabbing and being forced to do them, otherwise you're going to be losing your job, and also letting people know it's not going to be just 2 weeks as they tell us, and also telling people from the day one that it's not just going to be 1 or 2, it's going to be ongoing subscription model to this medical apartheid that we're now obviously seeing happening around the world. And we've been saying to people it's going to be a global phenomena. It's not just going to be only select countries. And exactly this is what's been happening, and at this point, we are pretty much prisoners in our own country. The other thing that I've done is we kind of, obviously branded ourselves as a civil rights movement of 21st century. However, what I can say right now, we actually way more than civil rights movement. We're actually a human rights movement. And the difference being in civil rights movement in the 60s and even before that, in the Deep South, people were fighting for equality, because what happened in some of the states, for example, in United States, is people were segregated. You had white theaters, white cinemas, white hospitals, white restaurants, and then you had ones for colored. And the reality is right now in Canada in 2021, and actually pretty much in most so-called First Nation countries, First World War countries, there is no such thing. So basically, there's no place for us in the society being jab-free to exist. And in fact, already many countries making the statement saying that if you're not going to be jabbed after a certain period of time, it's mandatory, which means you're not allowed to exist at all in that country. So we are definitely a human rights movement. And like I mentioned, it's a global phenomenon, but we definitely have to focus on Canada at the same time, showcasing other countries, especially if they are ahead of implementing these measures. Because, for example, Australia, last Saturday, we organized a rally in support of Australia. We marched from Queen's Park in Toronto to the Australian consulate, and also in Vancouver, for example, there was a protest in front of the Australian consulate. And it was done because Australia is about 6 months ahead on the measures as well as the infrastructure that they're already implementing there, and to have a social credit system and ensure there's no freedom for anyone. Doesn't matter if you've been jabbed or not. And that's also what we've been saying to people, that even if you're going to be compliant with the government as of now, later on, you're still not going to have any freedom. And we already see this happening in Australia, where someone who's been double jabbed and even had a negative test still being forced to be in isolation facility. And the same thing already happening here in Canada, where the travelers coming in, even being double jabbed and having several negative PCR tests, still forced to be in isolation facility against their will. And the reality is, if somebody would have told us, in 2019 in Canada, in Alberta, you're going to have 3 different pastors being arrested several times and held in jail in Manitoba and many other countries, and churches going to be boarded up, and police with almost like a SWAT team going to be guarding the actual churches so people cannot go and congregate and have freedom of religion, I would have called you totally crazy and nuts. But this is the reality. This is what's been happening in Canada since 2020, since last year. And unfortunately, most people don't know about it. And the reason why they don't know about it is because the media has been doing a great job at making sure that people brainwashed and indoctrinated, and there's no real information is being shared. Everything's been censored, everything's been deleted, including actual experts, including actual scientists and actual doctors who are standing on the right side of the history and sounding major alarm to let people know that these measures make no sense, and in fact they're causing a lot more harm than any positive outcome. And right now we are facing our kids 5 to 11 years old being jabbed with something that has not been approved. The approval in Health Canada is very questionable. There's just new information being released this week that one of the pediatric doctors out of BC, actually, who's supposedly been in a part of approval of these jobs for the kids in Canada, actually been subsidized by the pharmaceutical company. And this is what's been happening even before. Pfizer specifically is a convicted criminal. They actually paid the highest fine in the history of the United States, $2.9 billion, exactly for falsifying the data and bribing the experts and the doctors to push very dangerous drugs. And Johnson & Johnson is a convicted criminal. Moderna was created specifically to do this. They never launched anything successful in the past. And AstraZeneca is also, nothing good there. And in fact, the government's been saying since day one, everything's safe and effective. Everything's safe and effective. The government always neglected to admit to any possibility of negative effects from these measures. And this is something that's very alarming and troubling, because it's just common sense that in anything in life, you're always going to have a ratio. You're going to have a balance between what's really a benefit, cost to benefit ratio, so to speak, right? I always make two simple examples. If you drive a car, obviously the benefit of it gets you from point A to point B, but you also can get in an accident and you can be injured and potentially die. So those are cost to benefit ratio. Same thing with a knife. It's a tool that can help you to, make a meal, cut a slice of bread, etc. But you also can hurt yourself. So those are cost to benefit ratio. And in fact, every single thing in life has cost to benefit ratio, except for the measures and this, job that the government has been pushing on all of us. But the facts are on our side, like they've been since day one. And the 4 jobs that initially was always safe and effective, 2 of them no longer allowed to be distributed in this country after many people already got them and unfortunately got injured. So the AstraZeneca and Moderna is not, and even Johnson & Johnson is questionable. I don't know why it's still being allowed. And like I said, Pfizer is convicted criminal. And it's obviously very clear that our government is extremely corrupt. And in fact, at this point, is acting like a terrorist against its own people to push something that's, again, been completely unbiasedly given to people and pushed against their will. And the last thing I can mention regarding that, and then we can discuss Canada specifically in terms of its measures, is even Nuremberg Code, which is internationally recognized policy that was created after the obviously Second World War to ensure that no longer any medical experimentation would take place around the world. We have now openly the president of the European Union making an announcement that Nuremberg Code is something that she would like to get rid of and not consider anymore, including considering the rollout of these mandatory jobs that obviously is happening in Europe. If you don't know, in Austria, in Germany, and in a few other countries, is basically after February or whatever month, it's mandatory. You don't have an option anymore. So are people going to be forcefully put down and just jabbed with this, or what exactly is going to happen? So at this point, it's a human rights movement, and it's a matter of survival. So I even shared yesterday the definition of self-defense, and people really need to understand that self-defense is a human right, and it has to be exercised, especially when you're defending yourself against real harm, physical or mental. And the level of force is justified because, again, you are exercising self-defense. So right now in Canada, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that's supposed to guarantee our rights and freedoms. And again, these freedoms and rights that we have, they're not given to us by the government. We have them from birth. And the job of the government is actually to protect our freedom and rights. And if the government is overstepping them, that's why we have a constitution and we have a legislation that's supposed to protect us from overreach of the government. And unfortunately, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is being completely hijacked, and it's not pretty much applicable because we cannot travel, we cannot exercise, free will in this country anymore. And even the Bill of Rights, which is older legislation, supposedly is applicable at the federal level, but it doesn't matter. It's a Canadian legislation which also guarantees for us our freedoms and rights, and it doesn't have Section 1, which the Charter has, which supposed to the Section 1 of the Charter basically says that there's a reasonable limitations if there's something happens, the rights can be suspended. The Bill of Rights, for example, doesn't have it. And unfortunately, what we see happening in Canada, and especially around the world, and it's going to come to Canada, is the governments are trying to legitimize the complete overreach and tyranny that's happening to the people. And to that, I'm going to say very simple. It doesn't matter if things are legal or illegal, it doesn't make them right. Meaning that even if the Canadian government gonna create a law, which it doesn't have yet, which will forbid unjabbed people to travel, and I'll repeat, because it doesn't have a law yet. The reason why people cannot travel right now across even Canada, not even outside, is because the government made a public statement, and they also updated the website to say that the people cannot board planes or trains, but no law has been passed officially in the parliament for that. And what's happening, the private companies are basically they just making the policies and just saying this is a policy that our private company will enforce. And that's what been happening even since last year with mandatory masking, even though there's always exemptions to that rule. So this is something that's very unfortunate, very troublesome, and very real. And as we see, it's not just Canada; it's many countries around the world. But it's interesting to see which countries specifically are being impacted and affected. And it's primarily the countries that's been developed a lot in the last several decades. And again, like so-called developed countries. And the reason why I think is because people have been conditioned in those countries to be comfortable. People have been conditioned to seek comfort in every area of their life. And guess what? Defending freedom and future of your kids is uncomfortable. And that's why, in places like, for example, in Africa, they have a very low percentage of people complying and obeying with all this nonsense, as well as in South America, unless it's a very, if it's a country that has a high military and police and the government is very tyrannical, of course. Peru, I think, was one of the countries that had almost 100% job rate, but at the same time has one of the highest cases. And that's the other thing too. These forced jobs that being put out to people actually it's not effective. It does not stop the transmission. It's been publicly stated by even their own agencies and their own experts, but it still doesn't stop the government to tell people to take it for no good reason whatsoever. And we know why. Even Trudeau himself actually gets paid for every single job being bought with taxpayer dollars. So, and that's the other thing too for people to understand. There's nothing free. When the government is giving free tests, it's not free. When government giving this free injection, it's not free. When government giving free masks, they're not free. Everyone is paying for this, and that's why we have unprecedented spending in this country, and why we also have already one of the highest inflation in the history of this country. And unfortunately, the thing's only going to get worse unless we, the people, are going to do something about it. And I'm definitely grateful to be talking to the students here today because, students are the future. The young generation has to understand that, the brainwashing and indoctrination that's been happening is very severe. Myself, being born in Soviet Union, I experienced myself the indoctrination and brainwashing in terms of the communism, and I was indoctrinated into that since birth. And this is exactly what we see happening right now with this COVIDism, as I call it. That's kind of a new religion, and that's why we have to be proactive. Opposing, of course, the tyranny, but I would recommend to spend more energy and time on creating something positive and powerful over this tyranny, and more than anything, spend time and dedicate to the future, which is the young generation, kids and teenagers in this country has to know the truth. They have to know what's really going on, and they have to understand that unless we all take a stand together, we all going to be part of a global slave state. And to me, that's not the future that I want my children to live in. And that's why, I basically put myself all into this freedom movement as a human activist. And, I just do whatever I can every single day. And I do my best in terms of whatever choices or actions I need to make to move towards, making Canada free again. That's kind of some of the slogans. Hugs of masks. We all essential. We all essential is a business initiative that we started over a year ago to empower Canadian businesses to take a stand and learn about their rights. And then the latest initiative that I'll be developing going forward, and already kind of started with soft launch, is I Am Free Canadian. And what I mean by that, even though our country is not free, and my dream at this point to make Canada free again, we are all free Canadians ourselves. So as long as we unite as free Canadians together, we can make Canada free again. So that's a little bit of the story about who I am, why I do what I do. And the only other thing I can mention before we can maybe have a discussion with people is, since day one, I said the only two things the government has for them working is ignorance and intimidation. The government has nothing else besides keeping people ignorant and intimidating them. And guess what? We can combat both with education, empowerment, and connection to the community of like-minded people. And that's what I've been doing with Hugs of a Mask since day one. And we are essential with the business community now for over a year. And this new initiative that I'll be launching nationwide, I Am Free Canadian, is going to be, I think, what can make our country free again. So that's, again, a little bit about who I am, what I do, and all that good stuff. So I don't know, Lilian, if we have some people that would like to jump and have a discussion, I'm definitely looking forward to address some of the questions and concerns that people might have.
Yeah, thanks so much, Vlad. I will open it up for the chat now, sending out the link. While we're waiting, I actually just have a question myself.
Yeah.
So I know that all of this that's being done for these mandates and such, they're being done under emergency measures, because obviously these things don't comply with the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. How long legally is the government allowed to extend emergency measures?
Well, I appreciate the question, and it's very important for us to address first before we jump to a general discussion. So thank you for reminding me to talk about it. If you really think about definition of emergency, it's very straightforward. Emergency is something that happens suddenly, and also emergency is something that always short-lived. In other words, it has a short span of time. It cannot last. Emergency, by definition, cannot be going on for almost 2 years now. So are we really in an emergency, or are we just in a prolonged state of tyranny imposed by the government? Now, the other thing that I forgot to mention is that when I came to my very first protest on May 2nd of 2020, I brought several signs that I made by hand from Dollarama. I bought a whiteboard and I used a mark, and I wrote some important messages to me. One very important message close to my heart, and again, that's why I went all in on doing everything that I have been doing, said our kids deserve normal life. Because again, like I said, my son was just turned 4 years old at that time, and already been in lockdown for like a month and a half or more, I guess. He was telling me, like, I don't want to play with other adults. I want to play in the playground. I want to play with other kids. Like, this is not good. And I knew it. And he was only 4. It was very straightforward and understandable. So that was one sign. But the other sign that I brought already on May 2nd of 2020, and it was very obvious, the state that we are all in this country and around the world, that sign said real data versus fake model. And that's what people need to understand. Every single measure the government imposed here in Canada and around the world was always based on fake model, was based on speculation. It was never based on real data and factual information. The model was coming from Neil Ferguson from Imperial College, which was funded by Bill Gates for many, many years before. And guess what? Same Neil Ferguson was creating models for Ebola, for Zika, for SARS virus in the past, from H1N1. And guess what? Those models was always gravely exaggerated, right? So the fact is, we never had emergency in this country. It never happened. You know, everything that the government did is to create a state of fear, propaganda, and fake state of affairs. What I mean by that is that even people that were going to the hospitals, they had instructions to basically mark them as cases to keep feeding the narrative that we have all these cases. Majority of people that died with COVID in Canada, over 80%, those people died in long-term care homes. And the conditions in those facilities were always grave and really bad, even before. In fact, in Ontario here, the army, then when they came to help, with the outbreaks, so-called outbreaks, they made a statement. They made a report actually to disclose horrible, horrendous conditions in those facilities even back then. And there was nothing new. That's been going on for many, many years. So the statistics, if you don't know, the people below 18 years old, so basically kids and young adults, for the whole country of Canada, we have, I think, 18 kids and young adults dying with COVID. And the reason why I say with COVID is because every single one of those kids and young adults actually had real health conditions. One of the latest one in Alberta, I think was 11 or 12 years old boy that died, and initially was promoted as one of the youngest. And I say promoted for a reason. It was really promoted by the government and the media that this is the youngest death now with COVID from it and all this stuff. And again, it was created to continue with fear propaganda, especially in preparation for the kids' vaccination that's now been going on. But guess what? The family raised alarm saying that, no, our child had 4-stage brain cancer. And guess what? The Dina Hinshaw, the public health officer for the province of Alberta, had to apologize, saying that they made a mistake. Well, let me tell you, they did not make a mistake. This has been going on in this country and around the world since day one, where they were actually falsifying the data to keep fitting the narrative that we are in emergency and all the measures are justified. So to answer your question in this long fashion, but to make it short, we never had an emergency since day one. And all these waves that they've been fitting to us, the only waves that we're having is waves of case demics and scam-demic, as I've been calling it since day one. And I stand by this statement when I made it in March, April. And the other thing that I said in April of 2020 is we actually have a genocide of our elderly population, because the completely inhumane conditions that our elderly population been subjected to for the last almost 2 years is completely illegal and awful, because solitary confinement is one of the most cruel punishments can be made for people in prison. And this is what we're doing to our elderly people at the end of their lives. They should be enjoying their life. They should be with their families. They should be hugging their grandkids, not wrapped in plastic and just being completely suffocated on both sides. So yeah, no emergency, in my opinion. And I know that's a viewpoint that's now represented by a lot of health professionals, nurses, doctors, professors, scientists. And guess what? Anytime people within the medical establishment speak up and saying the actual truth and facts, they all censored and discredited. And to us, it just shows that that's the truth that the government cannot even allow to get out there. There's no debate of any kind allowed. And this is, again, the first time in the history where this is happening at the government level and, again, around the world.
Okay, thank you so much for your detailed answer. We're not having a lot of people wanting to come on video, but I have a couple questions from
Sure.
Our Facebook page. First one is, I'll paraphrase it, it's a bit long.
Sure.
This person is in a bunch of like the COVID chats to organize for freedom. And they say that they're seeing a lot of obviously out there conspiracy theories posted in there about like 5G and microchips and such. Do you think that these things being out there and being allowed to multiply, do you think that hurts the overall movement against these mandates, makes it less credible?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So The reality of the conspiracy theory was actually created by CIA to discredit any possible truth getting out there. This is a fact, and everything that we've been saying since day one, people called us conspiracy theorists since day one. When I was, doing my best to get uprising of the people early on, people were telling me, Vlad, what's the big deal? This is only going to last a couple of weeks. And, if I have to put a mask on my child for 5 minutes, 20 minutes to go somewhere, it's not a big deal. Right. And I was doing my best to explain to people that this is not 2 weeks. This is going to be forever. And your kids will be slaves in this new society that's going to be created. And the microchip is not a conspiracy theory. In Sweden, of all the places, which we were showcasing Sweden from the beginning because they never implemented any restrictions besides at the very beginning and very loose, and they never had the spike in any cases and mass deaths. So it just shows to us that places around the world that did not implement harshest restrictions or no restrictions whatsoever, guess what? Nobody died except for the regular numbers of people would be dying. And the other great example is to make Florida. But Sweden is one of the countries around the world where the adaptation of microchip is very big. So it's not a conspiracy theory anymore. It's literally happening right now in Sweden. And in China, the social credit system exists for actually several years already. And now in Australia, they're actually already passing the laws to implement social credit system there. So, and then 5G, the reality is this social credit system will have to work. The surveillance state will have to work. So what exactly is the conspiracy theory? Or maybe it's just a fact, and there's definitely a worldwide conspiracy. What is a conspiracy? Conspiracy is when more than 2 or more people conspire to attain a certain result. And what we're seeing right now is we have definitely a conspiracy at a global level between many powerful individuals to create a global slave state. So to answer that question, I understand people want to be mindful what kind of information they share and not to maybe blow people out of the water completely. But, everything is out there. Even our crime minister, and I call him crime minister for a reason, was saying that Great Reset was the conspiracy theory himself. And now everyone's saying it's a Great Reset. And every single leader around the world has a book on their table from Klaus Schwab, which is called Great Reset. And pretty much everything that's been implemented so far and going to be implemented in the future is actually in that book. So how much of a theory or maybe a factual information has really been shared so far?
Okay, thanks for that. So do you think, just to further elaborate on this question, there's some really crazy ones about lizards and such. Do you think that those ones, they do harm the movement, but you do believe that there are microchips in the COVID vaccines?
Yeah, so obviously there's many different levels to the theories or facts that people can go. And the way I see it, I definitely going to acknowledge the one that are very eminent and immediate that are going to be affecting our lives. So, my good friend in Vancouver, the comedian Alex, he makes this joke, which I agree. There's a lot of conversation if the earth is round or flat. The reality is that doesn't affect my life that much right now. So it doesn't really matter to a certain extent. But if the government lied about everything, which we have, which we see now, what else they really lied about? So the thing that I would suggest to people in general is question everything. And by asking the questions, you can gain awareness. And the other important thing that people have to get back to doing it, because I think especially again in the Western world, it's been by design taken out of the social life, is that people have to learn to be able to have 2 contradictory thoughts exist in their mind. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have in the society is that people are very polarized and they're not even having any ability at all whatsoever to even have a discussion of 2 opposite belief systems. And I think this is very unfortunate because like we're having right now, dialogue is very important because in conversations and dialogue with people, you're able to attain the truth. And you don't have to necessarily agree all the time with everybody. However, you need to respect people to have certain belief system and to have certain ideas and give people an opportunity to explain their side of the story. So that's how I would answer that question, if that makes sense.
Okay. Chris from Facebook asks, do you think that this is all part of an economic reset?
It's economic and social and many other aspects to this reset for sure. So the great reset from economic structure, of course, is coming to the collapse of the economies worldwide and collapse of the currency worldwide, and then introduction of the digital currency, and through that, ultimate control from the government. Because if the government going to control the money that's in your account, and they can just penalize you and take you out of the society because you're going to have no means to exist, again, like it's already exists in China for several years. This is, again, not a theory, this is a fact. It already exists in our world. Then yeah, economic reset is part, but it's a global reset in terms of the social infrastructure and general society and how people live in general, and the freedoms, ultimately freedoms and rights that they have going forward.
Okay, great. How long do you think that the COVID measures as they are now will extend to? Do you think it'll be indefinite? Do you think that the vaccine passports will ever go away? Do you think masks will go away? What level of mandate do you think that the government will eventually settle on, like a year, 2 years, 5 years from now?
Yeah. The reality is, and we've been saying this again since day one, unless we the people take a stand and we actually oppose this tyranny and we're able to establish either our parallel society or take over the government from the tyrannical overreach of these psychopaths, really, this is not going away on its own. The government's invested billions and billions of dollars into infrastructure. Why would they release the power that they gain? In the history of the world, and we have plenty of examples in history, whenever tyrannical government is installed, it will never relinquish the power voluntarily. It never will happen. And again, unfortunately, around the world, we already can see examples of that happening. In Australia, in Victoria, the most tyrannical place in Australia, they already passed the bill with Andrews, which basically gives him ultimate power to determine the pandemic state without anything. He just can call it himself, and that's it. And again, they're passing the law right now to establish a social credit system in Australia. In Oregon, they already passed a law to make masks forever, right? So, and then the biggest example that I would make for people to understand that this is a future that they're trying to create for us, a permanent future that they're trying to create on us, is to look at the books, to look at the cartoons that are already been created for the young generation. The indoctrination into what I call COVIDism is unreal. Again, coming from the Soviet Union childhood myself, I can tell you how incredibly efficient the propaganda and indoctrination machine is on the young mind, because I myself was the example of that originally, and it took a while, trust me, to be awakened to what's really going on and to see the truth. But for these kids that conditioned to wear masks all the time and to be scared of other humans and not to see facial expressions and basically become completely antisocial, this is the new norm for them. For the ones that unfortunately don't have parents that are awakened and know what's going on and taking them out of the indoctrination system, not education system. This is the other thing too that I kind of going to be pushing a lot in my speeches and anytime I have opportunity to discuss, is that we don't have a healthcare system. We have sickness system, and we don't have an education system. We have indoctrination system, right? So what we have to do on our side as freedom movement, we have to create actual education system, and it's happening already. There's many homeschools, many school pods that have been created, many mini private schools that have been created that actually educate the kids to be independent, reliant, self-sufficient, etc. And same thing with alternative healthcare and I can't even call it an alternative because it's a true healthcare. Because you don't go to the hospital to get healthy. You go to the hospital when you're sick. You go healthy to you get healthy at the acupuncture, at nutritionist, at massage therapist, at the doctor, practitioner who actually will understand and help you get better. Because again, the medical establishment is very clear. If they cure you, they lose a customer. And for them, it's a business. It's the biggest business in the world. If people don't know, the pharmaceutical company is the highest lobbyist group in United States, even bigger than the oil companies or the gun companies, etc. So think about this. They pump in billions and billions of dollars into politicians, into medias, to make sure that their money-making machine never stops. And the last year is exactly example of that, where the Pfizer and the rest of the criminals are making skyrocket profits, and they're already saying, and they can't even help themselves, how much grin they get and smile when they're talking about this is going to be for life and people will have to get jabs every 6 months, and sometimes they say even every 3 months. And again, this is what we've been saying since March, April of 2020, and people thought we were crazy and conspiracy theorists. There's a really good joke. The difference between conspiracy theory and the fact is about 6 months.
Okay, we have another question from the YouTube chat. They're asking about those threats of litigation, like those notices that you get. Is it worth using threats of litigation for smaller establishments or individuals that are following the guidelines / mandates and breaking our charter rights? Like, do these things actually work?
So I think the biggest thing that I'd like for people to do is to do something, right? And I really acknowledge the people that either take a stand without any support documents or they have several support documents. I'm sure many people have seen the video from Eaton Center from September 23rd, where myself and 5 other people went to Eaton Center to the food court on a day when the segregation policy was introduced in Ontario. And basically, you're not allowed to eat anywhere in public, including fast food restaurants and food courts, even in Ontario. In BC, it's a little bit different. In BC, you can go to the food court and fast food restaurants, but regular restaurants you cannot, right, without a vaccination passport, right? But what I'm getting to is, on September 23rd, on a day of the launch of that in Ontario, myself and 5 other people went to the Eaton Center, one of the biggest malls here in Toronto, and we went prepared with documents. We went with Trespass Act and several other documents to showcase when we're going to be threatened with security guards and potentially police. We'll be able to educate them that we're not trespassing, and we have a right to eat the food that we bought there. So, does it work every time? Pretty much. Sometimes, depending on the cops who's not educated, things might get escalating, and that's unfortunate. But that's, again, the part of the casualties that's going to be happening when you're defending freedom. And notices of liability is a similar example, where you basically explaining the people that they are going to be responsible for breaking the law, because this is all illegal, as we just discussed. But at the same time, even myself, I'm not a magic man, so to speak. Like, even I get denied service sometimes too, right? So it just depends. The establishment that you deal with. A lot of times people are uneducated in general, and that's what the government is betting on. The government is betting on these business owners to be ignorant, unfortunately, about the laws and policies. And that started with masks. Most businesses have no idea that the exemption to the mandatory mask exists. And that happened because no media or the government ever discussed the exemptions until Hugs of a Mask movement and several other people start going to the businesses, going to the transit system, and explaining on video that there's actually exemption in every single legislation across this country. The mask mandatory exemption, there's policy, there's all these exemptions included. But it took us volunteers in the freedom movement to educate the public as much as we can with limited resources regarding that. So to answer your question, I definitely encourage everybody to go and do whatever they can with Trespass Act, with notices of liability, or any other documents they find to support their stand. And I find for most people, it's just to have something in your hand as a document to validate your position gives you the courage to do it. And that's reasonable. So whichever
But
thing.
but they don't hold any weight legally.
So this is a good question. When we talk about how much legality we have right now in Canadian judicial system, it doesn't look very good. Meaning that we have already plenty of examples where the judges literally making rulings completely outside of a legal framework. So even if there's something being presented to these businesses that has a legal framework that's supposed to guarantee your rights and freedoms in this country, the reality is we are right now in a lawlessness. Like Canada at this point, for most part, is a lawless land, in my opinion. And it's very sad and unfortunate. Now, it doesn't mean we have to stop challenging the system and have to stop showcasing the legislation that's supposed to protect our rights. I don't think so. I think we have to keep going. It's something for us to be prepared. How far are we willing to push the narrative? Again, many people have seen my video in Vancouver where I went to the fitness world again after the segregation policy, and I was escorted out of the gym with 8 Vancouver police officers. I guess there was no other crime happening at that time except me going to the gym to work out my legs. But I even went to the headquarters of Vancouver the same day earlier, saying that, and I talked to the sergeant that I'll be going to the gym and I'll be exercising my right. And he joked around, make sure you train your legs, which I did that day, but not for long. So, but that inspired other people to do something, right? And that's what we have to do. We cannot stand down and just relinquish all our rights and freedom, because you don't do this in a war. And this is a war. This is a war on our rights and our freedoms and our future and the future of our kids. So I know it's a little bit longer answer to the question. So to the shorter one is, take notice of liability if that helps you. Take the Trespass Act if it helps you. Definitely connect with other groups of people and keep pressuring the businesses. And my suggestion is go to the police. Go to the local police station and have a discussion there with the staff sergeant to discuss the law and ask them why the police is not enforcing the law. And this is the law. The law is we have the rights in this country, and segregation doesn't matter if segregation is legal or illegal. It doesn't make it right. It was not right in Nazi Germany. It was not right in the Deep South or many other countries around the world in the history when it was happening. And it's definitely not right in Canada in 2021.
Okay, we have another question from the YouTube live stream chat. Personally, what is your next step in your political action? You said generally that people take over the government. What exactly does that mean? What does that mean for you? Like, what will you do next?
So I will continue doing what I've been doing since day one, which is continue to educate and empower the people to know about their rights, make sure that people are not ignorant in their knowledge, and stand up for their freedom. And I will be continue getting the momentum in terms of connecting people together. So my focus right now with I'm Free Canadian is to connect all the people that are willing to get uncomfortable. So before we take real action against this tyranny, we still need to gain the numbers. I believe we don't have enough numbers of people actively taking a stand. We have random examples of that happening across the country, but it's not enough. So for me, my focus, like it's been since day one, is to continue recruiting, so-called recruiting people into the freedom movement. We need to increase our numbers. And the positive that I choose to focus right now, after almost 2 years of doing this, is that the good news is that we're gaining ground, meaning that we had to almost wait to this time where we are right now for a lot of people to start suffering the reality of the situation. Because like I mentioned, everything that we've been saying since day one, since March, April, May of 2020, most people did not want to believe us. And most people were hoping that it's not going to be the case, what's really going to happen. Now, the reality is here now. Millions of people already are segregated from this society. If you trust the numbers from the government, and they're saying it's about 80% around the country of people that receive double jobs, That means we have 20% of the country that did not. So to me, that's millions of people across the country that the vaccine free, as we call ourselves. The government against likes to label us as anti something, anti-mask, etc. But we are human more than anything, and we are mask free and we are jab free or vaccine free people, right? And we're gonna stay this way. We're not confused. We're not hesitant. We're never gonna do this. And the good news for us is that our numbers are only going to grow from now going forward. The reason why is because the government reached a highest compliance possible with vaccination policy, meaning that the Canadian government will never get as many people to do the third job as they had them to do the two, and never going to get as many to do the four as they had to do the three or the two, meaning that we're always going to have people joining our ranks. And the reality is everybody is unvaccinated because you either never got it or yours will expire within 6 months or sooner. So what it tells me, this is actually after over 20 months of doing this work, and I definitely can use it like vacation, but I don't see it in the near future. Our work really starts now. Everything that we've been doing until now was building a foundation. And a lot of people try to give me a hard time, even within our freedom movement, and question my work ethic, question the results that myself and many other people the freedom movement was able to deliver. But they're missing a very important point, that whenever you build anything, the first thing before you go up, you go down, meaning that you build the foundation. And foundation is never seen because it's below the ground, right? So what we've been doing for the last 20 plus months is we've been building a major foundation on which we're going to build a strong house of freedom now going forward. And that's what I mean. My work right now, before we offer a real solution in terms of taking our freedom back from the tyrannical government, is mass recruitment into this freedom movement. So if you like what I just said right now, and especially if you're a young adult, because I'm looking to work with young people, because I want to ensure that the future is as bright as you all are, and you understand the importance of freedom in Canada and in the world as a whole, and you committed to ensure that humanity always prevails. So reach out to me. It's very simple. You can find me on Instagram at Coach Vlad, and on Facebook it's Vladislav Sobolev and Vladislav Freedom, my backup account. You can also go to weallessential.ca and contact me for there. This is our business empowerment network. And let's, like I said, we're all free Canadians, and together we can make Canada free again.
All right. Susie on Facebook would like to know, she's curious about your educational background. Could you go into that a bit?
Sure. So I finished all my school, initial one, up to high school in Kazakhstan, where I was born and raised. And that was initially former Soviet Union until 91, and then became its own country. It's actually pretty big. It's in Central Asia. I joke around, Borat is my cousin. And I actually have no issues with comedy. I find, comedy is a great way to communicate ideas and kind of get into people's mind from emotional standpoint rather than logical. But and then from Kazakhstan, I lived in Cyprus for 2 years. I studied in English college there. So I studied business, marketing, economics, computers, etc. And again, when I came to Canada at York University, I studied political science, social science, economics, labor law. And also, I actually did 2-year correspondence course in the Moscow State Academy of Law. So I completed 2 years out of the 4-year program. And then I applied for my status to stay in Canada. It took a while for me to get it, but I became Canadian citizen in 2011. So I've been a Canadian citizen now for well over a decade, and again, proud to be Canadian. The other education I have extensively is study health, nutrition, personal training. I was a certified personal trainer. I didn't keep up with my certification, but I was for several years. I studied nutrition extensively. And the other thing that I studied a lot is personal development, psychology, life coaching, health coaching as well, and a lot of communication courses too. And ultimately, the best knowledge that I believe I acquired was from books. I listened to a lot of books. Some of my favorite top 3 books that I always mention. One is The 4 Agreements from Don Miguel Ruiz, and I consider that to be my North Star. It kind of helps me to keep things grounded and peace in mind. Quickly, the 4 agreements are: number 1, be impeccable with your word; number 2, don't take anything personally; number 3, don't make assumption; and number 4 is do your best every day. And every day is different too. Your best, that is. The second book that I talk a lot about is Man's Search for Meaning from Viktor Frankl. Is one of the most recommended book by life coaches, Tony Robbins, etc. And that book is really great, especially in current times. It's showcasing that even in extreme situation, you still have a power to choose what you're going to be focusing on. And if you choose to focus on beautiful things and things that empower you, you're actually going to be able to survive any challenges that you're going to be faced with. In the third book that I talk a lot and I take a lot of my beliefs from and the actions and choices that I make, especially in the last 20 years, being the human activist, as I call myself, is The Infinite Game from Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek is someone who I admire a lot, and I learned a lot from his book, Start With Why, Leaders Eat Last. And the most recent book is, again, The Infinite Game, which basically discusses that if you focus on finite goals, you're always going to reach a certain point and enough is going to happen. And a lot of times, if you focus on finite goals, you're not going to be as successful in terms of expanding the consciousness and expanding the positivity around the world. So I choose to focus on the infinite mindset, infinite game, as again the book is called. And again, I highly recommend those things. But again, the knowledge that you can acquire from books and people is tremendous. The experiences that you have in your life helps you to expand your mindset. And I think that's why even people were asking me at the very beginning, how come we have so many immigrants in this freedom movement, freedom rallies from early on? And people were asking me, is that has to do with, maybe intelligence or education or stuff like that? And I had to correct the people. People are intelligent everywhere. People have knowledge all around the world. But what separates most people from being immigrants to this country is that we experienced tyranny in the past. We experienced similar situations. So that's why we have mostly people at the protest from the beginning from Romania, from Poland, Russian, Ukrainian, etc. People from Venezuela, people from China, because people know what happened in Venezuela, and it's horrendous what took place. And in China and in Poland, martial law in the 80s. And people see that what's happening right now in Canada is exactly the same trajectory. And that's why we are so actively doing our best to wake up, so-called wake up Canadians, so they can understand that this is not exaggeration of fear. This is just creating awareness and reality of where we're all heading.
Okay, we have another question from the YouTube chat. I think everybody's a bit too shy to get on video, or maybe they didn't do their hair and makeup like me. He's asking, what do you think about the origins of the coronavirus? Do you believe it escaped from a lab in Wuhan?
I don't think it escaped from the lab. I think it was released from the lab, but it was definitely created in a lab, no question about it. And it's not my opinion. It's actually an opinion, so-called opinion, but everything is an opinion. But this was stated by the Nobel laureate scientist, Luc Montagnier, a French Nobel laureate scientist, in spring of 2020. So the person that has probably some of the most best credentials within this realm made that statement early on. And now, we have examples of Fauci sending money illegally to the Wuhan lab to do all this research on gain function, etc. And I actually watched today the senator in the States made a tremendous presentation, which I screen recorded because I know YouTube takes him down. Even the U.S. senator cannot talk about the truth on YouTube. It's incredible what we're facing now, the censorship and the modern day book burning. But he showcased, like, Fauci did this very similar experimentation with AIDS pandemic back in the day, and he's using exactly the same examples right now with this CV made up pandemic that's been happening all around the world. So I believe it definitely was created in a lab, and it did not escape. It was released on purpose.
Okay, we have another question from chat. I think this is a genuine question.
Sure.
But they're asking, is there anything wrong with voluntary segregation?
What is voluntary segregation? like voluntary means that I voluntarily want to be segregated. I would like to talk to people that like to be segregated.
I guess maybe they're talking about like if businesses decide that they want to segregate. I'm not sure that.
Well, if it's a conversation about the businesses, which is probably the valid point, is that, well, again, that happened in Nazi Germany, where the Jews were not allowed to go to the theaters, to go to the cinemas, to go to the restaurants, and Jewish children were not allowed to play with German children. Like, that happened, and it was legal. Does it make it right? No.
It appears they're invoking freedom of association. So if the business owners don't want to be associated with specific people, do you think that it's okay for them to not let them in?
Again, under Canadian law, no discrimination is allowed. This is very simple. Canadian law does not allow discrimination of any kind. So if I'm gay, for example, and somewhere no gays allowed, this is illegal this is illegal in Canada. So why is this different? If I'm black and I want to go somewhere and no blacks allowed, that's not going to fly in Canada. Why this is flying in Canada? People should be asking the questions. And this is not a hypothetical point. In New York State, I think it's less than 30% of Black African Americans actually have jobs. So the segregation that happened in the history of the United States, it's actually happening right now. It's just happening under different cover. And the government and the media is brainwashing people to think it's okay. And I see it when I talk to the business owners or the people working inside, and I ask them question, are you okay with segregation? And they actually have a very they have this look on their face that they don't understand what I mean. I'm like, this is a segregation. So, and they don't get it. So I can see how the people having a hard time connecting the dots, because again, they've been brainwashed and conditioned that this is different. This is not different at all. In fact, this is worse. I repeat, this is worse, because at least in the Deep South, they had white water fountains and colored water fountains. They had white hospitals, cinemas, and theaters, and they had one for the colored people. We don't have anything like that in Canada. Right now, in Toronto, if I want to go and eat somewhere in a restaurant, I'm not allowed. What do you mean I'm not allowed? How is that even possible? Again, under the cover of a fake pandemic, over 80% of people died in long-term care homes. If you're below age of 50, you have almost zero chance of dying from this thing. And the jabs, by the way, don't stop the transmission. Now, most people are already being jabbed and they're spreading the cases. And you actually have I think in the States, over 20,000 people that are being reported died from this. How's that even okay?
All right, we have another question from chat. Oh, the audio is echoing. Is your mic muted, please? Okay. They want to know, do you think that the PPC is a good political party and has a future in Canada? They noticed that you speaking at a rally with Maxime Bernier.
So, People's Party of Canada is a party that has been supported a lot this past year for our freedom movements. In fact, most people that were running as the delegates for the party, I know a lot of them myself, especially the one that run in Ontario or BC. And in fact, I empowered several people myself to run as a candidate. So for me, I support people more than anything. So if I see solid people running in any particular establishment, either as independents or part of the party, I'm going to support the people first and foremost. However, the reality is, out of all parties in our country, between liberals, conservatives, NDP, Green Party, and PPC, there's only one party that's been actively against mandatory measures, and that's the PPC party. So if we come from that stance, I definitely support the only party that stands for freedom. And yeah, so that would be the thing. Now, how's the future going to unfold? Nobody knows. But for me, it was really good to see that people came together. And even with all the suppression that took place, and it again was really unfortunate to see that it was almost like in North Korea or China, where the opposition party was not allowed to have a debate. People were excluded from even going and voting for their own candidates. It was really unreal to see what's happening in Canada. Still, close to 1 million people votes been counted for this party. So that's a significant amount of people. And I believe if the suppression did not happen to the extent that it did, there was more chances for the party to get actual seats in this parliament.
Okay, we have another question here. Do you believe that all vaccines are bad, or are you just against the COVID vaccine?
Good question. So for me, I was always outspoken against medical establishment even long before COVID, being a health coach. I was very clear that, again, you don't get healthy to go into the hospital, right? It's a sick care system. It's a very corrupt system. There's no liability for these companies, even before COVID, but especially right now, again, if people don't know, there's no liability. So for me, if the company is not even willing to take a risk to be liable for its own products, how on earth any logical person will take up a risk themselves to take something that's not even the company themselves wants to be liable for, right? So at this point, before COVID, my first son was vaccinated with basic things. I was always against flu shots, for example, but after this all COVID things that have been uncovered and how corrupt the whole system is, it's very obvious to me that the whole medical establishment is not based to make people healthy. And again, this is a statistical, it's a factual information that even in Canada, before there was only, I think, 2 or 3 vaccination that people would get. And then later it became that, there's like 20, and now there's like over 70 before you become 18 years old. And what it shows to me, that people are more unhealthy now than they were before. So is everything that the government and the medical establishment doing making us healthy? We actually would be a healthier nation, not the most unhealthiest nation. So when you, again, look at the facts and the real data behind the measures and everything that's been given and provided to people, it's very obvious that there's no health in the sick care system. There's no health in the medical establishment. In fact, that everything that's been suppressed is where the actual health is. So, that's how I'm going to answer that.
Okay, thank you. So, all right, on YouTube, Marcia asks, can we use the International Court of Justice, which has its seat in The Hague, to challenge discriminatory measures used by the Canadian government against unvaccinated Canadian citizens?
It's a great question. Unfortunately, I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. Of the Human Rights Commission, and if you don't know, Human Rights Commission, every province has one. And the one in BC, the president or the director, whatever is the title, has been appointed through the UN. And they have a mandate to actually promote UN agenda and all everything that's been rolled out. And the disputes regarding mask exemption already been dismissed in BC. And at the same time, they're willing to consider the dispute of a man who wanted to be, vaccinating his private parts by a woman in the salon. So that kind of thing they're willing to support and protect. But, countless of nurses and doctors that, have to lose their job not to be subjected to medical experimentation. The BC Human Rights Commission made a statement, and the same happened in Ontario and many other places, that apparently Canadians have no right to body autonomy. And the Hague, International Court is part of the UN infrastructure. So unfortunately, I think we as Canadians are on our own. Of course, we have people around the world as ourselves, part of the uprising for freedom. But I would not rely on international institutions, which actually are primarily created to, again, install this one global government and ultimately a global slave state with digital currency and surveillance and the credit system, social credit system.
We're getting some lag over here on the stream, so I'm just gonna wait for a sec.
No problem.
Like as in it's a couple seconds behind, or is it?
No, as in like it's freezing and such.
Probably a lot of truth being shared, so I won't be surprised.
Okay, let me just see.
So many no one's looking.
It's just bad here, the internet.
You have somebody to admit. There's a Julia P in the lobby. Maybe
Oh.
somebody wants to come live to ask a question if you want to admit.
Perfect. Darn.
Global slave state with digital currency and surveillance and credit. Oh yeah, I hear there's a delay.
I think it's fine.
Oh.
Hi, Julia. Do you want to ask a question? It's okay.
No
You can just
Exit.
spectate here. All right, we have another question. He would like to know if you who you think is the one responsible for this in government. Like, is there anybody good in government? Are there any good politicians outside of, like, I know you like Maxime Bernier, but in mainstream politics?
So we have a few. We only have a very few people, unfortunately, and they're obvious. Anyone that willing to speak, and the reality is, I don't even at this point. I'm not even looking for people to speak against the narrative. Even people just question the narrative would be nice, But we have a very few people actually taking a stand. There's a couple of mayors across whole Ontario. One is Windham, I think, area, and then one is in near Niagara Falls. And then in the Ontario legislation, we had Randy Healer, who was the first one in May of 2020, May of 2020, raising questions about the lockdown measures. Then Belinda Karalakos joined him in questioning the narrative from the government. Then Roman Barber was the third one in Ontario legislation. And then the fourth one is Nicholson. He was, I think, deputy speaker even of Ontario legislation. So we have four